You're listening to Copper and Heat Radio. I'm Katy Osuna. We're bringing you an episode that we recorded in March of 2024 at the Treefort Music Festival, which takes place in Boise, Idaho. As some of you already know, I grew up in the northern part of Idaho and went to school near Boise, which is the state's capital, before moving to the Bay Area to pursue work in restaurants and fine dining. I originally left Boise because I wanted to pursue food, and to me, as a young 20-something, just introduced to chefs like Grant Achatz and other molecular gastronomy chefs, there just were not the kinds of restaurants that I wanted to work in, and also they had just closed the only culinary school, so I decided to leave. In the almost decade since I've left Boise, it has grown so quickly and so much, especially because of COVID and people working from home and the political climate of Idaho. So there's been a lot of tension between the new Boiseans and those that have been there for a long time, which is, of course, spurred on by the outrageous real estate inflation, staffing shortages, and cultural and political tensions. But what I was really interested in is what that has meant for the restaurant industry and for the people that are trying to carve out a food identity for Boise. This episode is a recording of that conversation from March at Treefort. We only had 45 minutes on the podcast stage, and things got a little bit heated at the end, so we kind of ran out of time. But after the full conversation and panel is a brief follow-up with one of the restaurateurs that I had on the panel, somebody that we've actually had on the podcast before. His name is Rami McManus, and he's from Kin Restaurant in Boise. So here are both of those conversations.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to tell our panelists, don't forget to hold the mic up real close to your face. Thank y'all for coming. I really appreciate it. So obviously this is a live podcast. It's going to be recorded. It's going up on our feed later. So I just wanted to say that up front because I'm going to do a little intro and then I'll let everybody else kind of introduce themselves. All right, here we go. You're listening to Copper and Heat, the podcast exploring the unspoken rules and traditions of restaurants. I'm Katy Osuna. And we're recording live from the Treefort Music Festival in Boise, Idaho. Everybody want to clap? And so before we kind of kick it off, I think a lot of you who are in this room already kind of know this, but I wanted to put this out there for everybody who's listening later. Obviously, Boise has always been kind of trying to carve out a food identity for itself, figure out where it kind of sits in the national landscape as well as the state landscape, the regional landscape. And right now is really interesting because there's a lot of new Boiseans who are coming in and there's a lot of decisions being made about, what Boise needs, whether they're folks from within, from without. And I wanted to throw out a couple statistics for people who don't know much about Boise. So Boise has about 750,000 people in the metro area. It is one of the fastest growing. I think all y'all already know this because you feel it with all of the construction downtown. And something that I found really fascinating that I think kind of sets the stage for what's happening in Boise right now is within the last year, we had our first chef, hi Kris, win a James Beard Award here in Boise. And also within the last year, the first of 4 In-N-Outs has opened with 30-hour waits, apparently. So I think that says a lot about where Boise is right now as a city. And I'm going to kick it over to our lovely panelists who are going to talk about the state of the Boise food scene right now. So maybe we start right over here. Reno, you're up.
Hello, my name is Reno Rodriguez. I'm the chef over at Hotel Renegade. We're opening this spring. Been here for about 3 years in July. Just excited to really be a part of the Boise community. The electricity and the excitement going on with the growing culture, especially from the food and culinary dynamic, has been, you can feel it the last few years, especially with Chef Kris winning the James Beard Award. That was awesome. And there was a quote that I read, and I forget exactly who it was, and I'm paraphrasing, but that James Beard Award was the tide that's rising all ships. So that benefits all of Boise. It's not just Kin, which we're very proud of that, but it's something that's going to get us noticed. So.
My name's Katy Baker. I'm the executive director of FAIR Idaho. FAIR stands for Food, Agriculture, Restaurants, and Establishments. We are a nonprofit trade association that represents and advocates on behalf of independent food and beverage businesses. And we're actually the first nonprofit of our kind structured like that in the United States around the local food system. And so we have about 400 members across the state, and we were born out of the pandemic, really noticing that there was a need and that no one really represented or advocated on behalf of those interests. And so how can we work together to strengthen the food system and strengthen our food community? So I'm happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Amanda Ashley. I'm a professor of urban studies and community development at Boise State University, and I'm also the director of the School of the Arts. And since I moved here since 2011, I have been so in awe of the community-driven work that happens with the kind of the food scene that we have here. And in my research role, which has very strong applications, and in my role as the director of the School of the Arts, I'm very much interested in that kind of integration between art, community, and place. And so seeing how that manifest here in such powerful ways because of all of the entrepreneurs, because of all of the innovators, because of the policymakers, and how much they care about this is, I just feel very lucky to be here. So thank you for having me today.
Hi, I'm Ramey McManus. I'm actually Kris's partner in the restaurant Kin. I have to tell you, the last time that I actually did a podcast for Copper and Heat, I was sitting in front of Stone Cold Steve Austin. And when I got on the elevator here, she had a stormtrooper waiting for me. So slightly intimidated to start things off, but very excited to be here. Actually, Katy talked a little bit about FAIR Idaho. We were actually part of the organization that started FAIR Idaho as well, and very proud of the work that she's done over the course of the last 3 years. Very, very impressive. Very excited to sit on this panel and talk a little bit more about Boise's food culture, how it's grown in the last 20 or so years that I've been involved in it, especially the last 10 years with State and Lep and Kin. And I see some of my staff members here as well, so thank you very much.
Thank you all so much for being here. Can we please give them a round of applause? I guess I can say a little bit about me. So obviously I'm Katy. I'm the host of Copper and Heat. And so I grew up actually in North Idaho in Coeur d'Alene, came down and went to C of I. And so this is where I started my culinary and journalism. And then moved away to the Bay Area because I was like, oh, I want to go work in fine dining Michelin star restaurants. And they didn't really have that here in Boise. So moved over there and then started a podcast. And after winning a James Beard Award, decided to do that full time. And so this is what I do now, which is great. And so we are now back in the Northwest. Me and my partner, we moved to Portland 3 years ago because we, really missed the Northwest. We briefly thought about Boise, but, well, we're going to talk about how Boise has changed and grown and gotten more expensive. But so we've been away from Boise for 8 years now, but obviously, my partner and I come back and help organize food for it, and we really love being a part of the community here in Boise, and that's something that you don't find everywhere else, and I know that's what everybody has already kind of mentioned. But it is really interesting to see how much it's changed over the last 8 years, and even just in the last 2 or 3. And so I think that's where I'm going to start, actually. I want everybody to, if you can just in 3 quick words, describe the Boise food scene, I guess for the folks who were here in 2010-ish, about 10-ish years ago, or Amanda, when you first moved here. So, yeah, 3 words. Whoever wants to start.
Well, 3 words was very, very difficult. Talking to the panelists, I know that it was difficult. For me, it may be a little bit different. For me, it was new, exciting, and challenging. That was around the exact same time that I was just retired from cycling and starting the venture of State and Lep. As far as Boise as a city is concerned, I feel like it was slightly homogenous. Brew pubs, chains, although very well staffed.
Love that.
As a professor, this is so hard for me just to say 3 words and not expand on them, but I will do my best. So the first thing I would say is creative. The second thing would be a placemaker. And then the third thing would be a connector.
When I thought about it, Pollo Ray and the green salsa came to mind. Moxie Java and the sort of downfall of flavored coffee. And then hamburgers and fry sauce, because fry sauce is so Idaho, I feel like. So.
Reno, if you want to throw in like when you first moved here versus now, the first moved here part, if you have any.
I feel like when I first moved here, I mean, this is just, I kind of feel is just graduated to where we are now. So I wouldn't feel comfortable speaking to that one.
So then, actually, I'm going to throw it back over to Amanda. If you want to provide a little bit of context, I know you do, like you said, lots of placemaking, cultural identity of Idaho. And can you talk a little bit about how the cultural identity has been adapted with the urban development of the city, especially like in the last 10 to 15 years?
I think I'll talk a little bit about how in the research that I do really focuses on this idea of the arts, culture, and creative economy. And for like a really long time, that tended to be a very narrow focus of just on a very traditional sense of like what the arts meant and who counted in terms of how we thought about arts and culture. And over the past 10 years or so, there has been a massive push and momentum, not just here, but nationally and internationally, to have this focus on the creative economy. And so creative economy meaning thinking also about for-profit industries, thinking about how many artists and creative workers move across different kinds of sectors, whether that's nonprofit, for-profit, or civic, and also broadening who we think it is part of that conversation. And so, I mean, I think this is why it's so fitting that we're at Treefort, because the 3 areas that started to be included for the first time were food. Okay? And so thinking about food as part of the creative economy, thinking about music in different kinds of ways, and thinking about film. And you can see like how Treefort has been really important in that conversation and in leadership with so many of the other incredible leaders, many of which are up here and in the audience, and those that are not there. And so for me, I think about that a lot, like as that's somebody that studies the arts and how that manifests, particularly in the downtown corridor. And not just thinking about 8th Street, but thinking about broadly where that happens and what that looks like and who are the people that are making this kind of work happen. And so as much as it is about the food, it's also about how we support the food and support the kind of culinary arts that are happening. And so like, how does our transportation agencies, how does our economic development agencies, how do our arts and cultural agencies help lift that up? And frankly, where they also need to do a better job of that as well. And so I think about that in terms of like this kind of like longer view, and longer view, I mean, like since I've been here for 10 years, this has been going on so much longer than that, because like Idaho is like an agricultural state, but that is too big of a term to talk about, like in terms of like who the local entrepreneurs are, the producers, the suppliers, and the system like within which people are working, and actually how hard it is to do that here and in these kinds of spaces. And so that's why like I bow down to everybody that is on this panel for doing that kind of work. And so I think historically what you see is like this massive like redevelopment of a lot of spaces that didn't used to be food, right? That are now those kinds of spaces that are for here. And I don't know how many of you, like when you travel across the country, how many downtowns are dead, right? And they shut down at 5 p.m. and they're closed on the weekend. That is not what it looks like here. And I believe strongly that that is because of the food environment that has been created, which frankly is very different than a lot of other cities, and because of that connection between arts, culture, and community. I think there's a different conversation to be had about how we think about accessibility historically here and how we think about that in relationship to the neighborhoods.
Yeah, and I was going to kind of throw that in there and ask, because I know that is a big part of it, and we were just kind of talking about that before we started recording, but just like the labor environment is really hard. It's hard to get, because Boise is so spread out, it's hard to get folks transportation everywhere. And so it is really interesting to see how that is playing out as everything is growing, getting more expensive, and especially over the last 10 years. I don't know if anybody wants to talk on that yet, but you're welcome to jump in. Otherwise, I'll throw it down to Rami, because I really liked the 3 words that you had there, and I would love for you to talk about as you were starting State and Lemp with Kris, and kind of what everything looked like then, what you were kind of expecting folks to say about State and Lemp, what they actually said about State and Lemp, and then how that kind of compares to when you opened Kin.
So State and Lemp was kind of a brainchild that had been in my mind for years and years, but what we saw and what we anticipated were a little bit different. I think that happens with a lot of different restaurants and a lot of different businesses that people start. I anticipated that I would see a clientele that was near my age. I'm a lot older than I was when I started it. An arts-minded community, people that were seeking entertainment, a dining culture that was more big city life.
And when was this? What year?
What's that?
What year was this?
It was 2013 when we opened. I had to research that today. I spent many of my years traveling, and I would see in different communities in different cities restaurants that were similar to that, similar to what Kin is. And it seemed like the demographic was a younger, more affluent audience that was interested in that type of an entertainment, that type of dining, that type of bar. And that is not necessarily what we saw when we opened up. Boise is a more family-oriented community, I believe. At least at that time it was. So we did see an older demographic, but that older demographic had a lot of the same beliefs and philosophies that we did at State and Lemp. It did take us a while to get our legs underneath us. Throughout the course of the first year, we did have days where it was actually completely empty. But as we started to grow and the notoriety started to come, it would fill up more and more and more, and got to a point where it was, full 6 months out, 4 months out, whatever it might be. Throughout that time, Kris and I would sit, much to the chagrin of our wives, until 2, 3 in the morning, talking about the future, talking about what we can do better, talking about the community of Boise, where we would go after State and Lemp. And it was actually a couple of years in, we started what we called Supper Club. And this was essentially because we realized that our friends or our community group couldn't actually afford to come eat at State and Lemp. And that's when we saw the culture that I anticipated that we would see when we opened up. And that gave us new life, that breathed new life into us. So we started to change things up slightly, and the notoriety started to come faster. We saw, explosions on social media, things like that. And so more and more people were coming. Younger generation would come, they would enjoy it, then they would come back with their parents or their friends. So that's what we saw at State and Lemp. And I think that you had a lead into what we see at Kin, or?
Yeah, exactly. And just kind of how that changed. Because what was the time difference between when State and Lemp was open to then Kin?
Unfortunately, I think it took us almost 2.5 years. We took over the space that we're in at Kin shortly after State and Lemp closed. And we lived in it as 2 different bars. One was Art House, which we still have Art House. And then one was Ampersand. And that was effectively just to keep liquor licenses active. And then we spent about 7 or 8 months designing it and almost 2 years of construction. And that construction ended with the introduction of COVID. We got our occupancy the day after restaurants shut down for COVID. So nobody actually came inside the space for about a year. So we had a lot of time to think about ourselves, think about what Kin was going to mean to the community, what we could do as a small business that just started within the reins of COVID. And things like Kin at Home came about, where we produced a prefix menu that was 80% of the way finished. And then Guy Hand, I know he's out here, he would help us produce a 30-minute television show that we would send out to all the guests. And they got to watch that and read along and prepare the meal. So that was a really great way for us to connect to the community without actually seeing guests. And then we also did picnics, which was essentially a 4-course meal on the hillside with concerts that was socially distanced. We're a very adaptable team. We've been along together for, some of us, 9-10 years. So we know how each other work. We had the opportunity to do a lot of different things. The clientele that we expected at Kin is essentially what we expected. Learning a lot from State and Lemp. But that's just the tasting room side. The bar side was completely new to us, both Kris and I, not owning a bar before. And it is a different clientele. We have people from the age of 21, all the way up to the age of 85 that are coming in. And sometimes it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon that it's completely packed, and sometimes it's 11 p.m. So you never really know what's happening in a bar. But it has given us many opportunities to be more engaged in the community because it is a lower price point. It's much more casual. You can come in 2 or 3 nights a week. You can get a hot dog. You can get ramen. So we have the ability to engage with our community much more in this larger space, and that was our main goal, is to connect with the community, connect the guests with each other, and connect with our staff much more, be able to offer our staff much more.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like with the change of Boise over the last 10 years, you have been able to do a little bit more funky things, test things out, and also have a bigger staff and do some of those kinds of experiments, which it sounds like have been helpful.
Yeah, I do say that we are a band of culinary misfits, so we are very playful. And I believe this is a Kris quote, but we take what we do seriously, but we don't take ourselves all that seriously.
I love that. So I am going to go back to the question that I had at the beginning. So I interviewed Salome Mwangi a couple years ago, and she organized the Refugee Restaurant Week here in the Treasure Valley. And so I had asked her about the Boise food identity and how she would describe it. And so the 3 words that she had told me a couple years ago was an awkward teenager, growing really fast, trying to figure out its place in the world, really awkward. And so those are the 3 words that she said for kind of like the now of Boise with all of the influx of people moving here. And so now I would throw that back to y'all. And what would the 3 words for the Boise scene now be for you? Do we want to start at this end now?
I like the awkward teenager reference. Again, I've been here for 3 years. I'm seeing a lot of impressive things. Right now it's really exciting. I was really impressed with the diversity when I first got here. It didn't matter if it was Basque food, Greek food, Ethiopian food. All of it where I've been has been fantastic. But the excitement is really palpable here. Diverse and dynamic.
I love that. Katy?
I think it feels like nowadays that you can see these neighborhood pop-ups happening where there's restaurants and I'm up on the bench and we have Push and Pour and we have Wild Child, and just it's so nice to not have to always head downtown, although downtown is where we're at most of the time. And then community, because I have seen it and it has been incredible to really build that community, and the people that work together are always stronger. And then engaging.
I think I would say interwoven, community-driven, and experience-led.
I said exploding. There are so many restaurants popping up. It's actually it's quite fantastic, I believe. It's very ambitious as well, and understaffed.
That was a really great segue. Thank you, Raimi. Because I was going to ask you, Katy, because obviously you work with FAIR and you do a lot of policy and advocacy work. So what are some of the different pressures that you're hearing from restaurant folks, and what are the fights that y'all are choosing to fight?
Yeah. There's no issue or no shortage of issues within the food system is what I'm discovering, because you unearth one and there's 20 more. So we had the pandemic, which obviously was people either chose to participate in low vibration or go down the rabbit hole, or they chose to be a part of a community and get engaged really and build that up. And I think that through that building up and sort of that cooperative power that happened within FAIR and outside of FAIR, it's not just FAIR, but it was just really incredible to see that. And it allowed these conversations to take place where people were able to talk to a farmer in a way that they maybe hadn't. And so we really thought, okay, this is a system and we're going to be better off if we really don't have it just be restaurants or farms. And so it can really range. In terms of our advocacy, we treat it like it's not just restaurants, because the things that impact our farmers impact our restaurants. I remember when we first started FAIR and a farmer said to me, because I was like, we're so focused on restaurants right now. And he was like, Katy, we're all a system. If they're not doing well, we're not doing well. So that's been really incredible to see that it could be like saving farmland. Because that ultimately impacts a restaurant. It could be looking at livestock processing, which is a huge issue for a lot of our farmers. FAIR only represents small farmers that typically sell within the state. And then also liquor license legislation, not for the faint of heart. It is super dramatic, exhausting. I'm looking at some faces in here that have been through the trenches with me or reached out. And it's just not, we have bills being passed sometimes without engagement from industry stakeholders, without regard for alcohol beverage control. And that is what is happening right now. And it's really disconcerting to see this transpiring within our state, but I know we're not alone, right? We face this. And so it could be the pesticide bill that came about that, would eliminate the ability for farmers, farm workers, everyday consumers that get sick from pesticides to be able to sue, let's say, Bayer or other chemical companies. So when you look at it like that, there's those larger legislative activities that we have going on, but also the workforce shortage. We came out of the pandemic and it was not any better for any of our members. And I mean livestock processors, I mean restaurants, I mean bars, I mean, farmers. There was a sense of burnout. And so I think that when we go into a restaurant, when we go and get our food from a local producer, there is such of course we pay and we use our dollars to pay them, right? Which that means that's where our vote and our voice go. But there's also really just to understand and honor the sacrifice that they go through every day, because I don't know many people that would want to own a restaurant nowadays. It's exhausting. The margins are small. You can't find workforce. And so for us at FAIR, we're like, what can we do to help? So we negotiated for health and dental insurance for all of our members with Blue Cross, got amazing rates. We're waiting on finalization from the Department of Insurance. It's hard for sometimes Idaho to wrap their brain around something as different as FAIR Idaho, which represents a food system. We're not just a restaurant group, so we struggle with that as well. Really just saying, we got to think outside of the box, guys, because whatever we're doing right now, it is not working. And the people within the food system need our help. And so us as everyday consumers or as an advocacy organization, what can we do to support the people that are giving us food and washing our dishes so we can go home and enjoy the rest of our night?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you touched on obviously the workforce, and that's something that, as you said, is not just happening here in Boise or in Idaho. It's a national thing that is like, the pandemic happened, folks realized that working in restaurants sucked, and then they left, and now we're left with people who decided to stay, which is great. But now we're looking at a lot higher wages, which is something that you and I were talking about briefly before. And I think I mean, Idaho is one of those states that has a much lower minimum wage compared to other states in the country. And so, yeah, I would love to throw it to the two restaurant folks who are trying to find people right now. Like, what are some of the things that you're seeing here specifically in Boise about, recruiting, how to keep people, all of that?
Well, I think to your point, inflation it's not matching the wage. You're finding a lot of people that need to work 2-3 jobs to be able to support their families, which is really, really tough. And coming in new in town, we want to be able to kind of break that cycle and make it to where people still have their work-life balance. Life should not be dedicated solely to work. And with that lower wage, that makes that very difficult to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I see.
I had quite a few notes on that. Well, I think that to a degree there needs to be some change, and whether that's the employees or the consumers, or is it both? The professionalism aspect of the restaurant industry. Do consumers see the restaurant industry as a form of entertainment, or do they see it as a actual business? And also with the employees, do they see it as a profession, or do they see it as a stopgap to their next stop? I think that it was kind of a rite of passage for my generation, working in a restaurant, before college or during college, and then moving on to another job. And some of us have turned it into a profession, but I don't think that everyone does that, and I don't think that everyone should do that. Is there equality in pay? That's one of the things that we strive for as much as possible. And Katy talked about the health insurance and what FAIR has done. And that's something that's very important to us. And by offering health insurance and offering dental insurance and IRA and things like that, we are trying to professionalize it as much as possible. But is that a model that makes sense to every restaurant? Probably not. But if more and more can join forces with FAIR and can offer those things, do you get more professionals that are working in our industry? I hope so. That would be fantastic. Also, I think seeing restaurants as camaraderie versus competition, working with Renegade, working with the Avery, working with other organizations to do things collectively. And that is what FAIR is doing, actually. I think that you can develop a community. Everyone here has talked about community, and I think that's absolutely fantastic because that's what we're trying to build as well. So if community is actually what the restaurant culture is in Boise now, then I think we're in for a great change. We'll just see how that pans out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also, you keep providing me the best segues. Thank you. Because I wanted to ask Reno, because since you are relatively new to Boise and the Hotel Renegade is opening up and it's a restaurant group, Geronimo, that's based out of Wisconsin. And so you are kind of part of that influx of new Boiseans who are making a change. And so I am wondering, like, what do you and like other folks that are coming into Boise see as like why is Boise a hot market right now? Like, what's happening here that's exciting?
I've traveled a lot in my career, in my life, and a lot of places I've gone, I've realized that you don't go to impose your culture. You respect the culture where you're at. And one of the things that I respect the most about Geronimo is they preserve history, they preserve culture. This is the first operation we've built from the ground up, so we are on a different starting platform. But Geronimo, they recognize that opportunity to kind of build on the Boise culture. You had mentioned, Rami, about your supper club. It's something that's very Wisconsin and something that we're bringing to town, which is a type of restaurant that brings community together. It's not just a place where you go sit down, have a date, and you're really just kind of isolated from other tables. There's a sense of community when you go in there. And I think that recognition that Geronimo had coming here to Boise, that sense of community. I mean, one of my favorite things to do is go to the farmers market on Saturday. The farmers you meet there, Ballard Farms, River Ends Trout, the way that the food is tied into the community, you can feel it. And that's something that's very important to us as a company. That's something that we want to preserve, even though we are a new company coming here. We want to preserve that culture and kind of build on that. See if we can make that stronger. As far as the influences here in Idaho, especially in this area, very important. You've got local farms, a lot of local support that we can give to the surrounding community that I think that we all think is very, very important. That's going to be a big part of our programs and being able to really have that impact on locals.
Thank you. Let's see, we've got about 15 minutes left. And so I wanted to actually open it up for a Q&A before we move on to the last couple questions. So we've got time for a couple questions. Sure.
So at this point, a local restaurateur came to ask a question. He wasn't mic'd, so I'm going to do my best to just share what he said. His name is Cal Elliott. He runs multiple restaurants and a boutique hotel in downtown Boise. He is originally from Boise, grew up there and everything, but he worked in New York City for almost 3 decades before coming back to open his different spots.
Everybody talks about, but I don't really, I'm in the restaurant business, I don't feel a big sense of community. This community right now scares the hell out of me. So Reno's coming in and talking.
Here's kind of what he said. Community is something that everybody talks about, but he doesn't really feel a big sense of community. The community in Boise actually scares the hell out of him right now. So he says Reno's coming in and talking about fostering community, but how is he going to do that? Right now, all the restaurants in Boise are eating each other. He says Reno and his new restaurant are going to take staff away. He has the ability to pay more money. Geronimo, the hospitality group he works for, has money, and they can offer parking and insurance and other things that small restaurants can't. And Boise already has a really small pool of talent. So how is everybody on the panel going to support community? He says, we can say community a million times. We're just at the beginning of this growth in Boise. And he says, I don't know how we're going to survive it. I know how Geronimo and other big hospitality groups are going to survive it, but I don't know how I'm going to survive it or a restaurant like Kin is going to survive it.
I mean, Cal and I are really good friends, and we talk about these things quite a bit. And I understand from a perspective of a business owner how when new restaurants come in, it is a fairly transient culture in the restaurant industry. If there's a bright and shining light over here, you may be burnt out on your space, or it may just be the grass is always greener. And so you do see staff members that maybe abandon ship to go on to other establishments. Maybe the pay is higher, maybe it's new and it's shiny, whatever it might be. As far as business owners being able to be more community driven within the industry, restaurant to restaurant, that is a challenge that I see. And one of the challenges that I see is because oftentimes we are in the trenches. Kris and I talk about it all the time, and having the opportunity to work on the business versus in the business. And so many of us spend 10, 12, 14, 16-hour days at work, but we don't ever have the opportunity to get outside of work or to work on specific things on the business versus inside of it. And I think if we can develop this, if we can work on the business, if we can visit other restaurants, if we can develop a community of chefs, a community of front of the house staff that engage with each other, that go out on a Friday night after service and meet at a restaurant or meet at a bar and have discussions about this, then we can be more friendly. The camaraderie versus the competition that I talked about. If we can develop this camaraderie amongst the industry, then we can develop the camaraderie amongst the consumer as well. And so the consumer isn't going to just one specific restaurant. It's going to multiple restaurants in the downtown area. It is a challenge, though, for sure. I mean, I know Cal works 100 hours a week. So how does he meet up with me? It's at 2 a.m.
Yeah, go ahead, Katy.
Yeah, I think community is a tricky thing, and it can be frustrating for both people. But I know for us, I remember stepping into this job and people would say, oh, don't reach out to them, they're only big ag, or don't reach out to them, they're competitors. And I did the exact opposite, and I've never regretted a day since to not listen to those people. There's room and capacity for us all, but it's like wrapping our brain around what is community and how am I, if you're not feeling community, it's that question, how am I complicit in creating what I claim that I do not want? And so for us also, it's like, how do we help the independents, right? How do we help? And it seems like insurance was something that was of utmost import, for all of our members. And so how can we make it a little bit fairer playing field? And so for us, we worked, Cal knows this too, for 2.5 years on insurance. It was not for the faint of heart. And it has been really frustrating and depleting, but at the same time, we realized the importance of that. So how can we equal that playing field? And we also host a Field to Fork festival, and we're doing more regional events to build community around that. We encourage chefs and restaurant owners to show up, or livestock processors, because the people are not talking and they're missing out.
Yeah, and I think, Amanda, you had something.
I think I really appreciate your question. And I know that when I talk about community, I'm also interested in the communities that have had a long connection to food in their culture. And how do we think about that too, in terms of what we are nurturing here? I think we automatically always think about the Basque Block as a prime example of that. And then also broadening, who are the other communities that are in our valley? And how do we think about the ways in which we connect with how they interpret food as part of their culture? So I think a lot about that too. And it's a new place for me that I'm trying to explore and to understand more of. In addition to the kind of communities that I was talking about before, the bridging or the aligning, right? And so thinking about the relationship between the community that focuses on sustainability and how sustainability connects to the food systems, which is something that I have always been really impressed here in terms of how some of the agricultural system does think about sustainability, but also thinking about how do communities that champion public art connect to the experiences that people have in food. It's almost impossible to walk downtown from restaurant to restaurant and not see public art in those kind of lived experiences. And so I'm interested in the community building that happens also across systems in addition to within systems.
Chef, I feel your pain. I know what it's like to be in this labor market and how tough it can be. It seems like there's a lot of competition opening, and it's the labor pool versus what is available to them is vast difference. It's not like the rest of the world right now, which is making things a little bit more difficult. I walk down, every time I'm leaving the office at this point, I'll be in your boat soon, where I'm going to be doing 100 hours a week again here pretty soon. I do have the luxury of leaving, about dusk, and wherever I walk, I see restaurants, bars, doesn't matter the day of the week, full to the brim. One of the things that gives me hope is the influx of population that we're getting is going to be able to sustain, I'm hoping, all the competition that we do have, not competition, but the camaraderie. I like that. That's a much better word. And I had the opportunity to eat at your restaurant not too long ago. And one of the things that impresses me most about Boise in general is the chefs are able to evoke an emotional response with their food. I had the cassoulet at your restaurant, and it was like putting on a warm blanket in a cold winter day. Those kind of memories and those responses are what are going to keep bringing people. That's what's going to keep me coming back to your restaurant. When I go to Das Alpenhaus and go have Reuben over there, fantastic Reuben, one of the best I've ever had. And I'm going to keep going back for a liter of beer and a Reuben because I'm going to be thinking about that. I need that cassoulet again. I need that Reuben again. You're right. It's for us to, it's a fine line supporting who's working for us, our staff, and doing the right thing by them and being fair to the rest of the chefs and restaurants out there. I think it's tough. We want to take care of everybody and make sure, again, they have that work-life balance and that they're happy. But it does take a toll on us as well. I do understand that. And that's something that, maybe we need to get some drinks and talk about and kind of figure that out on a broader level. I think that's definitely a conversation that should be, opened up.
One of the words should be careful, right? I was in Williamsburg for 28 years. And that's what's the reason people go out to eat and love Boise and are coming here is because it's got a small town feel. And it had a feeling of community, right? But what's going to happen is there's the price point.
So Cal jumped back in at this point. He says the reason that people love to go out to eat And the reason why people love Boise is because it had a small town feel, and it used to have a feeling of community, but the price point is just too high for people to come downtown anymore. And developers are seeking out restaurant groups and chains because they can afford to pay. And we, as Boise, are going to lose everything that we've worked to produce. And then he says that nobody really answered his questions. So what are we going to do as restaurants and chefs to actually support each other, and where we don't poach each other's staff, and actually work with Katy Baker from Fair to create interesting culture and food? Mm-hmm. And he says none of that's happening. So let's not say that it is. And it's just the reality that corporations are coming in, they can afford to pay more, they can pay for insurance, they can provide parking, and they can afford to have a lower price point for a short amount of time, and independents are going to get pushed out to the suburbs.
It's gentrification. Corporations are going to come, they can afford it, they can afford to pay more, they can afford to pay health insurance, they can afford to have a lower price point for a certain amount of time, and then independents are going to get pushed out to Caldwell and to Nampa and to Meridian. And I mean, maybe that's just what it is.
And I think that's what everybody has kind of said in like different ways, because I think that's my fear coming back to Boise every single time, is that, especially from like a workforce perspective, because that's usually who like I'm thinking about is like the cooks, the dishwashers who can't afford to live in Boise. They have to travel really far to get in. And I liked what you said about the rising tide raises all boats, because that's my biggest fear for Boise, is that like all of these other big cities like Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, all the big ones have gone through this exact same thing. They're doing all of this. They've been doing this already, and they've done, you know, all the big real estate companies are coming in and doing this same thing. And that's my biggest fear is that, you know, we can't afford to pay the people who are actually doing the work. And unfortunately, we are out of time, because that is like an entire other conversation that we could have about, you know, all of that. But I think y'all have kind of mentioned it in different ways of like, you know, we have to work on a policy level, on an advocacy level, to make sure that like, you know, we're not cannibalizing other independent restaurants and all of that. And that's how you do it together. And then you have to, I think it is really good that there are restaurants that can pay people more and, you know, raise the professionalism in Boise, because that's, I think, what needs to happen. And so I think it is about working together, but how do you do that when you're working 100 hours a week? And I think that is something that, you know, Boise is not the first city to have done this and had to have like gone through this. And so I think that is something that, you know, it is what it is, and it's going to happen eventually. So I know we have to wrap up because there's other people coming in here and I feel really bad. Because I was going to ask y'all to tell me like what you hoped Boise looked like in like 10 years, but I think maybe we'll just have to keep people waiting and see what happens. So anyway, thank you all so much for joining. Thank you for your question. That was really great. Thanks, Cal. No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for providing your insights. It's been really lovely. Thanks.
So that was the conversation that the panel had at Treefort. It was great. Everybody was awesome. But I wanted to dig in a little bit more to Cal's question and some of the tensions and hopes for the future with the panel, which we obviously didn't get to. But I did have a chance to hop on a call with Remy to kind of follow up and ask him a little bit more. So the question that I wanted to wrap up the podcast with was this. There are so many issues in the restaurant industry right now, obviously labor, food costs and inflation, real estate and inflation, cultural appropriation, diversity. And for me, it's been really shocking to go back to Boise each time that we do. My in-laws still live in Boise. They live out in kind of a suburb that in the last 10 years, the like roads out there have just developed massively. They're covered in all sorts of developments and chains and outdoor malls and things like that. And what's really shocking is that the prices are the same, if not more, than in Portland, Oregon, where I currently live. So there is no clear-cut, this is what we have to do solution. Obviously, the issues are very complex and nuanced. But what is one thing that you would like to see happen in Boise, or maybe Idaho generally, to help restaurants, whether that is culturally or in policy, etc.?
As much as it pains me to say it, I see Boise trending towards a fairly homogenous style of restaurant, where you have organizations moving into Boise because they are the ones that can afford the rent. They're the ones that can attract the staff, and they're the ones that are the most appealing to landlords. If you are charging $30 to $35 a square foot and an X amount of cap rate, landlords are less willing to go out on a limb and accept a local small mom and pop shop that has big ambition, but not necessarily big track record. So I think that you're going to be seeing more restaurant groups coming into Boise, and whether that be fairly nice restaurant groups like Tavolata, and some other different organizations, or whether you see things like Buffalo Wild Wings and you see, drive-throughs like the In-N-Out, things like that, that the landlords can almost guarantee payment. You're not going to see diversity in the restaurant business in Boise. You're not going to see, ethnic communities opening up restaurants in Boise. That's just not going to happen. It's not feasible. And if they do, they're not going to last. Mm-hmm. And then you see these restaurants opening up, large scale restaurants. Saltbrush just opened, and I'm very excited to have a restaurant like that open up in Boise. But the staffing, I know the staffing has been an issue for them. And what's going to happen when another restaurant opens up with the staffing? I think there's just only so many people that you can pull from. There's only so much of a population that you can access to service you. And a lot of like Cal said, a lot of those are coming from other restaurants. So that's really difficult to watch as well. Yeah. We cannibalize each other just to save ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that's competition, not camaraderie. And I would like to see more camaraderie rather than competition. So yeah, fairly homogenous food industry here in Boise is potentially on the horizon, as much as I hate to say it. There's so many cool things that are happening right now, but I am a little bit fearful for the future with staffing and rental rates and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. I wanted to ask that question because every time I come back, there are like a lot of really cool things that have opened up and all of that. But I am scared that there are also an equal number of people who are moving from elsewhere being like, you know what, Boise needs this. Yeah.
In-N-Out burger.
White people from somewhere else that are like, hey, Boise needs this. And it's like, well, what about all the really cool, interesting people who are already here doing stuff?
Right. It's really a bummer.
What was supposed to be a quick follow-up with Ramey ended up being a 45-minute conversation, which is great. We talked about a lot. We talked about a whole lot, but one of the things that we did get to touch on, which is great, is the fact that Kin has been at the forefront of Boise's restaurant industry since they opened State and Limp back in the early 2010s, including not only winning a James Beard Award in 2023, the first in Idaho, but also being rated number 16 on the 2024 Food and Wine Best Restaurants list. So they've gotten a whole lot of great feedback and community support from the accolades. But what Ramey attributes this to is their model.
Our model is not necessarily a restaurant model. If someone came in and they were like a restaurant analyst and they wanted to talk about food costs and labor costs and everything else that goes into being a profitable or successful restaurant, they would look at us and say, I don't think that you guys read the manual. You guys are doing something that's completely different, and I'm not sure that it's actually the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. But for us, it is. We're built on community, we're built on connections, and that's the thing that we strive for. And certainly there are things that we do that people would, turn their eyes up and say, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? But, the most important thing is to be involved in the community. And if we can continue to do that year after year after year, then the community will continue to support us. There's always a buzz for a new restaurant that opens up, but sooner or later, people have eaten at that restaurant. They've enjoyed that restaurant, and there's not really much more enjoyment that you can get out of it. Instead, they find another one, and then another one, and then another one. And there's always inevitably another restaurant that's opening up. But because we change things so often, and because we strive to be more invested into our community and we welcome everyone in, then people are more engaged and they're more apt to come back, day after day, year after year, for experience after experience. And, that's the thing that's important to us. And potentially that will rub off on others. And there'll be other restaurants that are more invested into the community and more invested into their staff. And potentially we can change one restaurant at a time. And then maybe we have 6 restaurants, 10 restaurants, 20 restaurants in 10 years that are doing the same things that we're doing. And then we've built a restaurant community, and then that homogenous restaurant community in Boise doesn't exist. Maybe it's just a restaurant community of friends and family and colleagues that are, giving back to the city and doing good things. And I mean, that would be fantastic, but I'm a realist. Not an optimist. People say I'm a pessimist, but I tell them no, I'm a realist. I know it's going to go bad. I don't think it's going to go bad. I know it is.
Thank you so much to Treefort Music Festival for having us host this conversation. And thank you to Rami McManus, Katy Baker, Amanda Ashley, and Reno Rodriguez for taking the time to talk with us. And to Cal Elliott for the very good question. We'll be back more throughout the summer with some other bonus episodes, including a live conversation from the first ever Cookbook Fest. I'll be chatting with some chefs about their experiences as professional cooks and chefs writing cookbooks. So stay tuned for that and other bonus episodes by following us on social media platforms at Copper and Heat or on your favorite podcast app. Thank you so much for listening.